You're listening to Truth to Power Live with Dumisani, Washington. Yes, it is Truth to Power Live with Dumisani, Washington. I am your host, Dumisani, Washington. Great to be with you on this Sunday, August the 4th, 2024, broadcasting out of the WNEW HD3 FM 102.7 in New York City. How you doing, New York? And you can catch our streaming. Go to ttplive.com. That's ttplive.com. And you can check out all the streaming that's there. It's on Rumble, it's on YouTube. And we are launched on Podbean now, so it can be wherever you get your podcasts. And I hope our team has finished loading up the previous episode. This is episode number 8. It's been 8 weeks already since we started this whole radio venture. Don't know where the time goes, but it moves by so quickly. And there's so much to get into. As you know, on our show, if you haven't checked it out already, we cover everything from Bible, music, politics, culture, the Black American community, current events, geopolitics, Israel, Africa, marriage, family, education, and pretty much everything in between. And we have a few of those topics to get into on today. As a matter of fact, last week when we were concluding, we were actually in the Word of God in the book of Nehemiah, chapter 5. And as we were preparing for today, I think our team has this ready for you. I'm going to pick up from there. We were talking about biblical principles in terms of leadership in the context of the political realities that we are facing now, both the presidential race between Donald Trump and the presumptive nominee, though it's not official at this moment still, Ms. Kamala Harris, vice president. And we talked also about Kamala Harris coming out of California. We talked about the fact that one would need to know the political state of the state of California. We referred to Gavin Newsom, talked about him, how that has been over these last several years, from his years back 20 years ago as mayor of San Francisco and now. So not so much into that again. Check out that episode 7. But on this fresh new episode 8, I want to go right to the Word of God because we're going to connect a couple of different things. We had done a little bit of a promo, a little prelude, and we used an example of Bishop Patrick Wooden. He is the senior pastor of the Upper Room Church of God in Christ in Raleigh, North Carolina, just a few hours away from where we live. And he had some interesting things to say last week about this whole political part. So we're going to share that with you later on in the show, not in the first segment, probably in the second, maybe in the last. Because I want to make this case scripturally here. I give a couple of disclaimers in that. As a matter of fact, if you're on any of our social media, on our Instagram, on our Facebook, on Twitter, you've seen the clip that I'm referring to, and I will actually share that clip in a little bit and get you some of that commentary there, because there's some things we need to look at. But I want to look at the Word of God first. Nehemiah chapter 5. Now, this is literally where we left off last week. In chapter 5, we went up to verse 13 when we were discussing the issue of Nehemiah, who is the rebuilder of the wall. Nehemiah is known, there's the book of Nehemiah in the Bible. Nehemiah is one book. It's a dual book, if you will. It is the story of the rebuilding of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem and the walls of Jerusalem under the leadership of both of these men, Ezra, a priest, and then Nehemiah, who was actually part of the Persian king Artaxerxes' court. So it's very powerful. I mean, the word of God is powerful. During Nehemiah's rebuilding, the wall is completed after the first few chapters of the book, but it was the religious and civil reforms that Nehemiah instituted at great pains and at the opposition of the leadership of the people. We were talking about the oppression of the poor, the oppression of the working class. Nehemiah becomes the defender of the poor, the defender of the working class, and he clashes with the leadership, those who are supposed to be caring for and leading the people. He had to rebuke them for what it was that they were doing, how they were exploiting the people. So I want to start here reading at verse 14, Nehemiah 5, verse 14. It'll be on the screen for you. Team will put it up there for you here. Verse 14. Moreover, from the time that I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year to the 32nd year of Artaxerxes the king, 12 years, neither I nor my brothers ate the food allowance of the governor. Verse 15. The former governors who were before me laid heavy burdens on the people and took from them their daily ration, 40 shekels of silver. Even their servants lorded it over the people. The servants of the leaders lorded it over the working class and the poor. But I did not do so because I fear God. Again, that same thing they referred to a few verses before we talked about last week. I also persevered in the work on this wall. I also persevered in the work on this wall, and we acquired no land, and all my servants were gathered there for the work. Verse 17, moreover, there were at my table 150 men, Jews and officials, besides those who came to us from the nations that were around us. Verse 18, now that was prepared at my expense, for each day was an ox and 6 choice sheep and birds, and every 10 days, all kinds of wine in abundance. Yet for all of this, I did not demand the food allowance of the governor because the service was too heavy on this people. Remember for my good, oh my God, all that I have done for this people. The previous governors of Judah, before Nehemiah returned to oversee the rebuilding of the wall, he describes them as being corrupt in that they laid, as he said, heavy burdens. He means tax and fee burdens on the people, which included wine, which included livestock. The people were already poor, and part of their poverty came from the fact that they were paying high interest rates on the mortgages for their loans, for their lands, for their vineyards. They could not pay those off, so that in this time, the banks were foreclosing and taking their children as slaves. We talked about that last week. So this is what's actually happening. This is all internal, right? This is not, there are internal, meaning this is within the Jewish leadership and within the Jewish working class and the poor. There are Gentiles who are exacerbating the problem, which we'll see here in a moment. However, this is actually fundamentally the problem of corrupt leadership, in which Nehemiah is now addressing. He is heartbroken because not only are the poor being oppressed, but they're being oppressed by their own people and the people who are supposed to be leading them, who are supposed to, especially now at a time in which there's such brokenness and they're trying to rebuild Jerusalem after 70 years prior, the destruction of the temple, the destruction of the wall by the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. So in explaining this, he's explaining that the load placed on the people was written in law, so that the people began to bring to him, even in their poverty, the oil, the wine, the other foods. And Nehemiah's like, what's going on? Oh, well, the other governor said we need to do this, so we're doing this as has been commanded. So he had to actually go and amend the law, right? So again, you're talking about civil reforms. He actually has to go, because what's written to the law are the high taxes that are destroying the people. Okay. So he has to then stop the people from bringing all of this and then write in the law or amend the law, has to do a legislative work so that the people are not dying under this burden. It is a remarkable thing to see in that Nehemiah, again, is not only burdened by what's happening to the people. He says, I believe we said on verse 15, the last part of verse 15, he said, I did not do so. In other words, I did not keep these punitive tax laws and financial burdens on the people. He said, not because I wanted to be a good fiscal manager, not because I wanted to grow the economy. All that is true because he did give them their tools back so that they could work the land and pay off all their debts. He said, because of the fear of God. He even asked the leaders at some point, don't you fear God? He's reminding the people reminding the leaders that because the people for whom they serve as leaders, as governors, as princes, as statesmen, as priests, because we talked about, we'll get into this hopefully before we run out of time on today. He says, as a leader, your position comes from God, and the people are made in the fear or in the image of God. So how you deal with them is how you're dealing with what God has charged you with. So he said, I did not keep these punitive laws in place because of my fear of God. Meaning, oppressive rulers, whether they are oppressive financially, whether they are oppressive in other ways in terms of laws, restrictions, those things that beat down and burden down the people from being able to live life and provide for their families. The Bible teaches that a leader who willingly oppresses the people that he leads, a governor, a president, a prime minister, a king, that person is now in danger of the judgment of God. Why? Because his or her dealings speaks to the fact that they don't see these people as being created in the image of God, and God himself is offended by what leaders would do in oppressing their people. The first segment is already done. Got to take a hard break. A little bit more. We're going to continue with this after these messages from these sponsors.
Hey, baseball fans, looking for unique and inspiring experience? Visit the Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center in Little Falls, New Jersey. Dive into the legacy of one of baseball's greatest legends, Yogi Berra. Explore his 10 World Series championships, personal memorabilia, and countless inspiring stories. Discover interactive exhibits, educational programs, and special events for all fans of all ages. Perfect for families, school trips, and anyone who loves the game. Come celebrate the life and career of Yogi Berra at the Yogi Berra Museum. For more info and tickets, visit YogiBerraMuseum.org. Don't miss out on this grand slam of an experience.
Hey, New York. The New York City Basketball Hall of Fame is making a comeback. Follow all the action at hoopshallny.org or on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Just search for Hoops Hall NY. That's hoopshallny.org. See you there.
Are you ready to take charge of your health and well-being? UK Health Radio is your ultimate digital destination for cutting-edge health information and inspiration. At UK Health Radio, we know that good health is not merely the absence of disease, but a state of complete physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Tune in to our wide range of expert-led shows where renowned health professionals share about the latest research, practical tips, and inspiring stories that will motivate you to live your healthiest life. Don't settle for anything less than vibrant health. Tune in to ukhealthradio.com, the world's #1 Talk Health radio and podcast platform.
You're listening to Truth to Power Live with Dumisani Washington.
Go to ttplive.com, ttplive.com. We have a little issue for those of you not just listening on the radio and you're seeing this, the camera might look slightly different. We had to switch a couple of things out during that little break. We had a little bit of an issue on the other camera, so hopefully it doesn't look too different. But again, sound should be the same if you're listening to it on the radio. Again, ttplive.com. Now, we were just reading Nehemiah chapter 5, a few verses there, and I want to read another part of it because we were talking about Nehemiah having to institute civil reforms because of the oppression of the poor, the oppression of the people. Nehemiah chapter 6, I'm going to read these few verses, and we're not going to really unpack this now. This is probably for another later date, but I'm reading this for another reason, because Nehemiah wasn't just having to deal with civil reforms, but also religious and what was going on spiritual. This is spiritual warfare. And I'm reading now Nehemiah chapter 6. We have it for you, verse 10. And now when I went to the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, son of Metabel, who was confined to his home, he said, "Let us meet together in the house of God within the temple. Let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you." He's talking about an assassination attempt on Nehemiah. They are coming to kill you by night. Verse 11, "But I said," Nehemiah speaking, "should such a man as I run away? And what man such as I could go into the temple and live? I will not go in." And I understood, or I perceived and saw that God had not sent him, meaning Shemaiah, but he had pronounced the prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired them. Now, those are two Gentiles. They are from, I don't remember at this very moment, I don't want to switch back on there, but they're from the enemy nations of Israel. Verse 13, "For this purpose he was hired, that I should be afraid and act in this way and sin." In other words, act covertly as if I had done something wrong. So they could give me a bad name in order to taunt me. "Remember Tobiah and Sanballat. Oh my God," he's praying again. "According to these things they did." And the last part, "And also the prophetess Noadiah and the rest of the prophets who wanted to make me afraid." He's got now a group of people who are represented both within the civil laws, the former governor, and the other ones who are reaping the benefits of these unfair laws and practices. He's also now got in with the priest. He had to deal with the priest, with what they were doing, how they were compromising, what they were supposed to be doing. And then also now he lets us know that Noadiah is a leader of the prophets there in Jerusalem. And they too have come against Nehemiah and his religious and civil reforms. Nehemiah is being attacked. There's even a possible assassination attempt. Well, we know that there's an attempt from the outside, but even within Jerusalem, there are those who are angry enough at Nehemiah for making the changes that he's making that they want to do away with him, or at the very least, make it look like he's plotting and planning. And what he means by that is against King Artaxerxes, who's the Persian Empire is still very much in charge. So that if Nehemiah starts acting sideways, if he starts, looking like he's like got some sort of delusions of grandeur where he's going to set himself up as king of Judea and then come against the Persian authority, then they could use something like that to lie like that. So this is what he's saying here. This is the religious part. So Nehemiah represents the leader who's attempting to do right by the people and is in his faith in God. He recognizing that his role as the leader, who's been given the permission and even the resources by King Artaxerxes of Persia to return to Jerusalem to oversee the rebuilding of the wall. He has a tremendous responsibility. And one of the things that he begins to see is that the oppression of the people, the oppression of the poor, is coming from not just Israel's enemies, but also those who are inside of Israel, who are within the Jewish community, but are coming against them now, or coming against the poor, or taking advantage of the poor. Now, what's the point? Is the point that, oh, these Jews are doing bad things? There's a principle thing. This is not about them being Jews. This is about those leaders having the responsibility for their people. And I'm making this point for several different reasons. This is the scriptural principle here. The Bible's very clear about our role as leaders and our obligation and our duty to the people to lead with justice and with righteousness. And it's funny that the word in the Hebrew, tzedek, is the same word. Tzedek is righteousness. It's the word we use for justice in the English. Nehemiah is embodying these things. The purpose, as we're reading, isn't to lionize Nehemiah, to praise and honor him and give honor to whom honor is due. He's a good man. He's a wealthy man. He's attempting to not take advantage of the poor so that the economy in Jerusalem and so that the lives of the people can be made better. And again, that's just stronger, a strong national defense, our strong families with food and sustenance. And again, once the tax burdens are laid on the people, not only is that immoral and not only is it ungodly in terms of taking everything from them, it makes the people weaker and the nation less capable of fending off enemies. This is part of the concept that's here. So Nehemiah embodies it. Nehemiah is embodying what it is to be a good leader. He is embodying what it is to put Torah principles or godly principles or love of people or concern for people above politics, above wealth, and above his own personal ambitions. Nehemiah is trying to do the right thing. I'm going to say that again. Nehemiah is trying to do the right thing by the people, even the leaders. He's letting them know, he's not saying nobody can lead, I'm the man. He's saying you can't do it like that. Don't you fear God? You're not supposed to be laying these kind of tax burdens on the people. You're not supposed to be taking their children into slavery because they can't pay their debts that you are placing on them, right? And then the whole prophetess thing, we see that even within the prophetic, even within the ministerial class, there's such corruption and such greed that even the prophets have turned against Nehemiah, and they are falsely proclaiming things about him in order to intimidate him, in order to somehow stop him from doing what? The right thing. So Nehemiah is trying to do the right thing, and there are other people, both represented within the ruling class, in terms of the government, and in terms of the clergy, in terms of the priests and the prophets, who are highly invested in him not doing the right thing. Nehemiah is trying to do right by the people and in his honor and reverence of God. And there are people who should be helping him, who should be encouraging him. There are people who are trying to discourage him, dissuade him, distract him, and even take him out to keep him from doing the right thing. And it's not even so much about those people coming against Nehemiah hating the other people. They are just benefiting in the way that they're benefiting. They are just reaping the benefits of a corrupt system, be that money, be that power, be that influence. And they don't want that money, power, and influence jeopardized. And Nehemiah is coming to mess up the whole thing. Christians, when we talk about it, when Jesus went into the temple and he overturned the money changers' tables, he was looking at corruption. He was dealing with distractions. He was dealing with people taking advantage of other people. And so he came in there, made a whip and got busy. And he said, it's written, my house shall be called the house of prayer. That's one scripture and another different scripture. But you have made it a den of thieves. You are taking advantage of people in their vulnerable state. They've come here on the holy day to bring sacrifices. You know that they have to buy the animals here. They can't have taken them from very, very far away. And now you are charging exorbitant prices. You're getting over on them. What are you doing? That's not what this is supposed to be about. So Jesus takes matters into his own hands once again and drives them out. Nehemiah is a type of Messiah figure in that he has come to rebuild the walls, to restore the national security, just as Ezra came to oversee the rebuilding of the temple. But also now he's seeing that he's having to bring religious reform. You could say that Nehemiah didn't really sign up for this. He figured he was going to go and help rebuild the wall because he heard about the lowly estate of the Jewish people. And that's begun at the beginning of Nehemiah chapter 1 and 2. But when he gets there, he recognizes that unfortunately there's some schisms and some divisions, and he's having to check some people and put some things in place because of the way that the poor and the working class are being taken advantage of. So we could lots of applications here, but among other things, I want to, we have a couple of articles. There's a couple of articles I want to share with you. One of them is entitled, it's from Gatestone Institute. You see it there. Why has the Biden administration donated close to $1 billion in quote unquote aid to Hamas since the October 7th massacre? It's written by Robert Williams of the Gatestone Institute. Gatestone Institute has been a resource in the work that we have done for my work with the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. And even before then, the different articles and writers that are part of the Gatestone. I believe they're Gatestone Fellows. I'm not sure. Amazing writers, and they always do their due diligence. Some people that they consider it right wing. I remember I posted this article a few days ago, and someone went on my Instagram, and that's hardly a credible source. That's always the source. This, first of all, Gatestone Institute is an amazing organization. Shout out to Miss Nina Rosenwald, Julius Rosenwald's granddaughter, who actually, I believe, is the founder of the Gatestone Institute. Had the opportunity to meet her a couple of times. Wonderful lady. Appreciate the work that she does. I want to read. It's a very well done article, but there's a specific part in here. Staff, if you can help me remember. There it is, yes. So I'm going to read 2 paragraphs from this article. And what all this about the leaders and the tax burdens and everything? Well, the money that the U.S. sends to these either relief efforts or to the United Nations, they comes from the government doesn't have its own money. The government's money is our money, right? So tax money goes to, and you can hear the anti-Semites and the anti-Israel people. I'm not naming them because I don't have time to do that today. We give so much money to Israel. They always reveal themselves, right? We have a military relationship with Israel, absolutely, and there's technology that Israel develops, and we have access to it. Not to mention them being on the front lines of this entire this war, all the terrorism, those types of things. But also the dividends on it are highly repaid from to the United States. But we also give money to many other nations and many other foreign entities or organizations that represent foreign entities, and those same people don't say very much about that at all. It shows you who they are. But I want you to see something here from this quote. This is a quote from the article again. Why has the Biden administration donated close to $1 billion in relief to there again in aid to Hamas since the October 7th massacre? It's about the food insecurity. This is something that has been said over and over again. It's a Hamas talking point. President Biden has talked about it. Kamala Harris has talked about it. It's all bogus. But look at this quote. The question nobody seems to ask is whether it is a reasonable policy to send billions in aid to a terrorist group supposedly for 2 million people who apparently do not receive it, rather than to, for instance, according to the U.S. World Food Program, which works in cooperation with USAID, quote, nearly 350 million people around the world who are experiencing the most extreme forms of hunger right now. Of those, close to 49 million people are on the brink of famine, end quote. They're quoting from this other source from USAID, right? In other words, you're giving billions of dollars to Hamas because of quote unquote food insecurity, and Hamas is actually taking the food from the people, right? But it keeps going to this next part, next paragraph. USWFP, which is again the U.S. World Food Program, lists the 10 countries suffering the most from hunger right now, updated on June 25th, happens to be our anniversary, including Sudan, 26 million people facing extreme hunger. The Democratic Republic of Congo, 23.4 million facing extreme hunger. Yemen, 17 million. Yemen is also enslaving some Ethiopians who've crossed over to the border. This is from a couple of years ago because of unrest there with the Tigray regions, another conversation. Syria, 12.9 million. These people are suffering from food hunger, right? Afghanistan, 12.4 million. And South Sudan, 7.1 million people. Gaza is nowhere to be found on the list. Gaza, it doesn't even register, even with the U.S. aid, the WFP, which is the USA World Food Program, even in their stats, it doesn't even register. In other words, it is completely bogus that some 2 million people in Gaza are suffering from hunger or from food crisis of any type. And for those who are, it is directly attributable to the fact that of the thousands of tons each week that go into Gaza, as we said before, Hamas hoards that food. Again, this is only a section, a snippet of what this article is referring to, in that the Biden administration giving some $1 billion, probably more, in aid to Gaza, which it's the worst kept secret that money is going to Hamas, which is, according to Forbes, as we said before, the third wealthiest terrorist organization in the world. It goes on to cite how Joe Biden, Anthony Blinken, who's the Secretary of State, they are well aware of the fact that Hamas controls everything that flows into Gaza. Yet we, as an this administration, has still given $1 billion of what? Tax money to terrorists post October 7th. Yes. Oftentimes it is conflated that a nation's, or let's deal with America, our foreign policy or spending is not the same as the domestic, what gets spent here. There's all kinds of rubrics for that. There's budgets that are set aside. The problem that, however, is that for people who are paying $4 or $5 a gallon for gas, who can't afford eggs, who have to choose meals that they're going to skip, which has been going on for the last several years, it's already one thing to know that your tax dollars are going to foreign governments. I don't care if you're pro-Israel, anti-Israel, whatever. If knowing that money is going there, that might be a stretch for anybody who especially is struggling financially themselves, right? That's another conversation. But to know that the money is going to terrorists who are using the money to pay for lavish penthouses, fly in private jets, have billions of dollars. Once again, the leaders of Hamas, the three top leaders, are worth some $11 billion. The article also goes on to talk about the money that has been released to Iran, okay, which is the number one state sponsor of terror. So here we have another situation in which, for the poor and the working class particularly, as the word of God very expressly was dealing with, as we were looking at Nehemiah just a little while ago, here we have a situation where, in the midst of especially the difficulty financially in the United States for the poor and the working class, especially the working class, you have a situation in which we are aware that billions of dollars are going to terrorist organizations. Let me do this one more before all the break comes up here pretty soon, because everything's going by so quickly today. There is another article. Now, this one is a opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal. But it's based on information that came out of the House, of West Virginia Senator Shelley Moore Capito, right? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I think it's Capito. And the title of this piece in the Wall Street Journal is "The Radicals Getting Your Tax Money." And then the subtitle, "The EPA awards $50 million to a group that says Palestine is a climate justice issue. Palestine is a climate justice issue." Now, I'm not going to begin to read a lot of clips from here. I just want to say that you need to check out this article. A couple of them have been written around this, the information that came out of Senator Capito's office as well. And they have to deal with the, what is that called? The Inflation Reduction Act, right? There is money flowing, according to the receipts that they have, from the Inflation Reduction Act that is going to leftist organizations that want a free Palestine, that are actually helping stage demonstrations that are against Israel. Some of these things that are happening against Jews, some of the stuff you seen happen on the street. Last week, I won't do it again, we shared a clip from CNN where Jake Tapper is asking one of the Biden advisors about the fact that his top donors are the ones who are also very heavily funding the anti-Israel protest that was on the college campuses, but even now continue on the streets. And the advisor really had nothing to say, just had basically, well, everybody has a right to protest. So again, here's the Biden administration, whether it's taking their donor dollars and then oppressing on the streets, or whether they're taking tax dollars and giving it to terrorists and terrorist organizations. This is what's happening now. These are some of the issues that need to be discussed in this current election now. Here is part of the oppression of those that are already under burden, their money being taken to be used for silly terrorist supporting causes. These are the discussions that need to be had now in Capitol Hill. All the dog and pony shows about all this other kind of, we stand with this, we stand with that, whatever. Who is holding accountable the lawmakers who are supposed to be checking this illegal, immoral use of taxpayer funds? I got one more short break, and then I've got to share with you this other clip, as I shared with you before, as I talked to you before, from Bishop Patrick Wooden up there in Raleigh, North Carolina. One more break, we'll be right back right after this. Hey, if you are a business or a nonprofit and you want to know about purchasing ad time or underwriting whole or part of an episode of Truth to Power Live with Dumisani Washington, we would love to hear from you. Just email us at info@ttplive.com, info@ttplive.com, Truth to Power Live. And we would love to hear from you, connect with you. Our sales and marketing team has been assembled, and they are prepared to offer all types of creative plans for you, whether for your business, again, for your nonprofit, in which we can partner with you and doing this work here together. We, again, love to hear about what you're doing and love to see how we can partner together. info@ttplive.com. Thanks a lot.
You're listening to Truth to Power Live with Dumisani Washington.
ttplive.com, ttplive.com. You can check out all the streaming. You can stream it live from the website there. You can also get the link to the other platforms where the show is spread. Thank you for being with us at Truth to Power Live with Dumisani Washington. Last segment here. Let's see. I got to do a couple of clicks here. They're going to help me. I had mentioned this particular clip that I'm going to share with you. You'll be able to see it. Obviously, if you're watching, the team will have it up there. If you're listening to it on the radio, I'll have the audio. And what I'll do, I'll interject a little thing, because he's talking about, this is Bishop Patrick Wooden in Raleigh, North Carolina, who is a very firebrand. He's a conservative. He's not a Republican, but his politics are conservative. And he is talking about how the federal government, and I heard him talk about this in the past, came to him and basically threatened him because his politics are wrong. So you'll hear it here. And again, you'll see it on the video. You guys, come on, let's go ahead so we can cue that up for everybody. Let's see, ready? Okay, let's go ahead.
I am high profile, and the IRS, the government, watches me. I've heard from them. They've told me that. We know who you are. We're watching you. They came to see me, sent agents to see me. 3 agents to come after me. And we met in the suite. I had to get an attorney. They were quite belligerent in their address of yours truly. You know, I'm no shrinking violet. I give just as good as I get. I push back. I'm not a punk. I say what I mean what I say. So I finally asked them, what did I say that was so wrong? And the brother who was on the team yelled out to me with a high voice, you said Kamala Harris is bad for black people, and you can't say that. I said, is that what this is all about? I said, well, what if I told the truth? You still can't say it. They said, we are here to revoke your nonprofit status, and we want to go back and look at every offering the church raised from the day you made that statement up until this current time and tax you for that too. I want to say to my friends in ministry on the other side, you got it made. Because on the other side, you can invite the politicians you like to your church.
B-roll of Biden in someone's church.
And I saw one the other day, the man invited the person he wanted and preached him.
Biden is coming back.
Church in Philadelphia.
He's a comeback kid. He's a fighter. He's a champion.
You can say anything you want on the other side, and you don't get a visit
for Kamala Harris.
You don't get harassed
with churches.
You don't get anything.
Kamala Harris at another church preaching.
I was in church when I learned that I was a Democrat. I learned it from the pulpit when I was a little boy. I am a non-affiliate, just for the record. I've never been a Republican. I'll never be a Democrat again. But the point I'm making is that's lawfare. That kind of behavior is a threat to democracy because it's designed to silence dissent.
There's a screen that goes after that, and then we'll sharing it there. Basically, it's a disclaimer that says that this video, and now I'm even saying it on this show, is the purpose of the video particular, as Bishop Wooden is speaking, and as the B-roll of both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in other, especially black churches. I believe Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. Reverend Raphael Warnock, who's also a senator out of Georgia, is the pastor. There's a picture of Biden there with the choir singing. He's standing there in church. And then there's another one with B-roll of President Biden during the election at another church. I believe it's Mount Airy Church of God in Philadelphia. And the pastor is preaching a message, and whatever the title of the message was, whatever it was, whatever the crux of it was, sounded like he was coming towards the conclusion and saying, President Biden is a comeback kid. He's a champion. You know, he's being lauded and applauded. So Bishop Wooden may have been referring to that person preaching his candidate. And then you had another B-roll of Kamala Harris at Raphael Warnock's church, giving a speech. She was being welcomed and everything. And again, so for the purposes of that video, and even now, this is not an attacking of those other pastors and churches for having political people there, nor is it a lauding and applauding of Bishop Wooden in the sense of, now we're going to jump into this as an argument. We're making a principle argument, but it's not about the personalities and the churches and the pastors and everything. I want you to really hear what I'm saying, just like we were talking about in the book of Nehemiah. I also need to say this. I also am aware of the fact that there have been, to my knowledge, Republican candidates who've gone to black churches, other churches, and who've spoken, who, to my knowledge, those churches were not sanctioned or at least threatened by the federal government. It seems to happen at certain particular times. Bishop Wooden would be on the radar for several different reasons. Again, he's a very outspoken man about a lot of different issues, about gender issues, about marriage issues, all those things. He'll stand on his conviction and he'll preach, and he doesn't really care in that sense, the kind of pushback that he's going to get. So I would imagine, I'm just assuming that that's part of the reason why he would have been on the radar. Like he said, federal agents, 3 different IRS agents going to his church there in Raleigh. He even says in that video, the longer clip, the original clip, that they came from 3 different states. So he said they paid for 3 different plane tickets, 3 different hotels, all that stuff, hotel rooms for all to come and see him, to threaten and intimidate him. And when he asked, what is all of this about? That's when one of the agents said that you said something disparaging about Kamala Harris. You said that she's not good for black people, and you can't say that. And he was saying, I was saying what I believe to be true, first thing. But then as he was talking to his congregation, he was saying about other ones, and we put this in the B-roll. The clear bias that if what Bishop Wooden is saying is true, there's no reason for us to believe otherwise. He had shared other accounts in which he had been in hot water with the government and others who did not like what he was saying, but he has a constitutional right to say it and to preach and to minister and whatever. They said there he was threatening, that they were threatening his 501c3 status as a nonprofit organization, of course, who can receive funds and doesn't have to pay taxes. And they are implying that because he's being partisan. Well, there are other pastors, black or white or whoever, who again host, platform, or even help campaign for their guy or girl, their man or woman, and they don't get sanctioned. And so in this particular environment, we kind of use those B-rolls so you could see someone like Joe Biden in the pulpit of a black church, Kamala Harris in the pulpit of a black church. There's another graphic that there was it was a black church organization. It was different organizations, black churches that were actually calling, you could sign up for this event that's coming up. I can't remember what state it was. And then you can get information. They said, it's funny, on the description on the website, it says that they're going to give you information about nonpartisan information or whatever, something like that. But then also you can help get Kamala Harris elected. It literally says it in the thing. I'm going, but if it's nonpartisan, why are you trying to help somebody get elected? It's because they, as a church organization, have chosen to back Kamala Harris to be the president in 2024 election, which, okay. Bishop Wooden's point is that he got federal agents visiting him in his church, threatening his nonprofit status for saying what he said about the vice president, who's a Democrat. And then he made the statement, my friends in ministry on the other side. He meant on the other side of the political spectrum. He was saying, as he said before, I'm nonpartisan. He said, I'm not affiliated with anybody. He's conservative, but he said, I'm not a Democrat. I'll never be a Democrat again. I've never registered as a Republican. He said, I didn't really, if you caught that last part, he said, it was in church that I learned I was a Democrat. What he meant was, as a young boy in a black church setting, he learned about the politics of his community, both his church and the broader black community where he was, from the pulpit. He then learned or equated Democrat with black and church. That's what he said. Many of us who grew up in black churches can attest to a very similar thing. Either there was hardly any politics in your church, or if there was, it was often on one side of the aisle. Some pastors would have different candidates come in and share information. I'm going to not name the name, not because it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, but one particular pastor, which I'll talk about some other time, would sometimes have people who are running for whatever office in the city and would have different ones come and share a few words to the people so that you can just see them. It wasn't a partisan thing. It was like, oh, this person is running for this council member. This person is doing that. And that's the most equitable or the most, even-handed thing that I had seen in coming up. But in other settings, I would see, here's the Democrat and we are Democrats type of thing. And he's making the statement that he's being threatened. And there may be others, I'm sure. He just came out and said, here's what's going on. And he said, rightly, this is lawfare, true. In other words, the government using laws and its power within government, its power bequeathed to them, to silence dissent. The government doesn't want this preacher, who happens to be a black preacher with some influence, saying something about the regime in charge. We just got to be real. The IRS agents were sent to his church because he was telling people, both in his church and those watching online, Kamala Harris is bad for black people. It doesn't matter if you agree or not. And for those of you who are watching and listening, it doesn't matter. He said what he said, and then the government sent people to his house, to his church, to threaten him, meaning his nonprofit status, that he better not say it again. And they're going to actually remove his tax status and have him pay every offering that was raised since he first made that statement, which was several years ago. This was during the election, I believe, of 2020. So he then ends it by saying, it is, again, designed to silence dissent. One of the things that wisdom demands of us is to understand the underlying principle of a thing. I almost feel like one of those Dear Young People segments. This is oftentimes when I'll go there, because not that I'm not talking to older people, but my heart, especially where the young people are concerned. The man or woman who is not principled does not have a core to their being. They don't believe anything wholeheartedly. They do whatever, say whatever, blow with the wind, agree with whoever's the loudest in the room, all for their own selfish gain. That's already a bad thing. When you take someone like that and then you put them in leadership, it is catastrophic. Because that person can be influenced by anybody who's the loudest and who has the most money and be bought and paid for. Bishop Wooden here, and again, this is not about him, just like it's not about the other pastors that are in that little clip that were featured, especially the one that was preaching, that you may have heard it on the radio. This is not about him or his church or even the issue of Kamala Harris, Democrats, Republicans. This is an issue of integrity. This is an issue of right and righteous governance. If it's wrong for one preacher to say X, Y, and Z about a political candidate, tipping his hand in terms of who he wants to vote for, whatever, then it's wrong for another preacher who's doing the same thing. And let me pause here and say something particularly about the pulpit and that power. Margaret Sanger, a white supremacist and eugenicist, who developed ways of actually diminishing certain populations that she deemed unworthy. She's actually the forerunner of Planned Parenthood. She developed something called the Negro Project. And in her writing to one of the main funders of it, I believe it was, I don't want to say the name wrong, from Procter & Gamble. They don't have to pull it up now. We'll go through later on. But one of those two gentlemen was the funder of the Negro Project. And she explained in the execution of it, in other words, it was a campaign for the reduction of conception and babies within the black community. That's why it's called the Negro Project. She was for the sterilization of women, again, so they obviously could not have children anymore. Her record is so abysmal. Even Planned Parenthood at some point a few years ago had to come out and say, yeah, we've been kind of shucking and jiving, but we have to be real. She was pretty racist, and she was pretty, they actually, even Planned Parenthood had to admit that she was a racist. She's targeting black people, not just black people, but she's targeting particularly black people when others are that she called human weeds. In this campaign, the Negro Project, she said that she wanted to recruit Negro ministers who could keep their people in check, so that if the word got out that they were trying to exterminate the Negro race, then they could set them straight. In other words, what she was saying was that we will have Negro ministers, black pastors, who to this day hold such influence within the black community. If we can get certain black pastors to parrot these talking points and to make it seem okay what we're doing to that black community, if they can, from their pulpits, say these things, then the masses won't be wise to what it is we are attempting to do. Why do I bring up Margaret Sanger? There are black pastors who are also community leaders. Now, I can see several of them in my mind now, my colleagues across the country, who, for no political reasons or desire political gain, will say or do something that is not on the script. A black pastor who is championing, for example, education choice for his congregants and others in the community, where that is not allowed or it's completely frowned upon by the leftist regime in charge. The black pastor who is championing entrepreneurialism in their community and wants to see less government assistance and more building of infrastructure for businesses, that person gets marginalized and attacked as someone who's being uppity. Right? I have a black pastor friend who had the temerity in 2020 during the summer of love, quote unquote, with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and the Antifa, this destroying property. You had folks who were legit protesting and other folks who were out there just tearing stuff up, destroying businesses, especially black owned businesses. I had a black pastor friend who then in a city stood up and called out BLM for what it was doing, got death threats. Right? I'm not saying those death threats came from the government. I'm saying what that pastor was saying was so powerful, but was not part of the script, that people came for him and he had to get special security for him and his family. That's my point. Here's my dear young people thing, if I can do that. It costs something to either do the right thing or at the very least what you know to be right. And when the government, especially the federal government, uses its power, and its power is considerable, to shut down people from saying what they believe, preaching what they believe, we have long since entered into a time of despotism and a time of I'm only pausing again. I have to be aware of the dead time, dead air from. I'm still here. I haven't gone anywhere. It's interesting that Venezuela is on fire after elections in which clearly the opposition won. I believe Gonzalez is the name of the president who won, but Maduro, who is a thug, who is propped up by the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Iranian regime, very much active in Venezuela for a long time, back in the days of Hugo Chavez, is refusing to let go of power. People are protesting in the streets, and the police, who are still acting on behest of the regime, are beating people and incarcerating people and everything. We are not far from there now. I want you to consider, as I gotta go, what would happen, for example, for all of us pro-Israel folk on the left and right side of the aisle, if it then became frowned upon by a regime in power for a pastor to stand before the people in the pulpit, preaching scripture and talking about our standing with Israel and the Jewish people. What if the federal government decides that's no longer allowed? This is the same regime in charge that's allowing the Hamas protests, the attacks of Jews on the street just in New York the other day after Israel had killed one of the leaders of Hamas. You had throngs of people in New York protesting his death, calling for jihad, intifada, slandering Israel, slandering the United States, all this. And they were just fine. Not to mention the violent protests we talked about the other day, a couple of weeks ago, when Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, made a speech there in Congress, and you had folks out there defacing U.S. monuments and sites, taking down U.S. flags, burning them, putting up Palestinian flags. Nothing happening to those people. Matter of fact, someone got arrested, got released that same day. So we're not far from there. We're just about there. We're saying even something pro-Israel as a pastor could land you in, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. That means if you think it's conspiracy that it's not already happening with other issues, then you're not dealing in reality. Man, I'm already over time. So we got to pick up from here. We're going to talk about some more. But again, Truth to Power Live. Great to be with you again on Sunday, August the 4th, 2024. Looking forward to being with you for episode 9 on next week. Everybody, you all have a great week. Blessings.
Truth to Power Live with Dumisani, Washington.